sorts of encryption. It's just a matter of time. Somebody comes up with a better program. They might have taken under a course called ethical hacking, and they can strip it down and they can find the information. So you might as well, regulatory process is a different thing to prosecute people, but that's up to others. The minute information leaves your computer, leaves my mouth, it's not private anymore. Internet has done a lot of good, in my opinion, than bad, except when any one bad thing happens, it just happens at a ginormous scale. Two of the biggest breaches that ever happened were not due to internet. It was because of a USB memory stick. The NSA leaks and Stuxnet, they had nothing to do with internet. They were through a USB memory stick. So my question to you is, you can pick either one of the three. Would you like to, I would love to hear your comments on NSA leaks, Stuxnet, or Julian Assange. Did they do good or bad? Any comments?
So you gave me so many questions, I'll give you a very generic answer.
Okay.
I think, every organization has a moral obligation, not to mention most often legal obligation, to do due diligence, which is a legal term for really, the best they can to protect the information that they entail to protect, right? If they tell you that they're going to take your information and distribute it, well, you signed up for this, right? That's, Facebook and Google. If they tell you, though, that they are going to protect it, like, Rebel in Canada, they need to do their utmost to protect it. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are invulnerable to things like, heartbeat, which is a zero-day vulnerability, which has been, discovered and hasn't been patched for quite a while. So, they were in between a hammer and a hard place to actually mitigate this risk, right? In this case, if you took them to court, probably you wouldn't win, right? Although, you never know. Now, we're talking about, Assange and Snowden and the government data. And, I've heard stories on both sides, and people tend to sit on either the side, oh, these are traitors, they should be shot, or hanged. But, either one of these. Or, they are heroes, and, they've opened the world. The truth is that, both of them, they're both, right? They are definitely criminals, they've broken laws, right? On the other hand, they've definitely done something which stimulated public debate, which right now happening in the US, I think is very healthy, right? And for that, I think, they have to be thanked. Now, the debate hopefully is going to bring us closer to understand, what the right balance is between, protecting the citizen, protecting their information, versus protecting the national security and the greater good. Because, we know that you can go the wrong way in either case, right? So you look at the World War II Stasi, right? Pre-World War II, in East Germany. They were basically doing what NSA is doing right now, right? Except, with old type technology. This didn't go down very well in the history books, right? Or with the people. Having said that, you could argue that, 9/11 gives the government quite a bit of mandate and people demanding actually for them to do anything it takes to protect them from something like that happening. People are afraid, right? But somebody said, I think it was actually one of the generals, that once you give people the incident, like 9/11, they'll turn over all their data to you, just so that you can protect them better. Once the threat goes away, they'll give you a hard time because you're taking too much data from them, right? The balance is very tricky to call, and it's not an easy problem to solve.
I don't really want to comment on, as a former government person, on the individuals you mentioned, but I will say this. I wish I had a t-shirt that said, what I said to folks in government, when were you planning to tell the public what you're doing with their information. And that goes on both sides, the government and the private sector. And when you get to a situation such as we are in, where people who don't read about security, who don't read Bamford's books, who were blissfully unaware that this was going on, are surprised, it's not a good thing. Now, I was just in the Internet Governance Forum down in Sao Paulo, Net Mundial, and Jake Applebaum, who has been releasing a lot of the stuff from Snowden, was there. And I think it is a pity, a terrible pity, when we have really bright people like that, with integrity, I think he does have integrity, forced into the situation that he's in, when the government will not be more straightforward, and the private sector will not be more straightforward about what it's doing with data. There's a moral responsibility to tell people what's going on. Not everything. I mean, I understand there's national security, but we are so far out in terms of what's going on and what people understand that we are heading for disaster, because we do not want our best and brightest to turn into anarchists because they have no trust in society. And I think that's what's going to happen. So I think we need to correct this quickly.
Thank you.
No, all those. Question? I almost disagree.
If you'll allow me to be a bit controversial and continuing in my esteemed colleague direction, I think there's another side to this. If you take names like Kim Kardashian's, Paris Hilton, Jersey Shore, Natalie Nunn, those are people whose personal opinion only value is the fact that all their personal information is out there for everybody, and that's how they're making their money. That's basically like they're famous. Why? Not because they have talent in singing, in showing, or whatever. Well, they have talent in showing, yeah, but not showmanship. So, and there's a whole new generation. Like I'm thinking of my younger sisters-in-law and stuff like that, who are watching these people, admiring these people, and would, on some level, would like to be at the same level, who are saying, basically, take my information, put it out there, and let people know me so that I can become famous, and so I think there is also that side to consider, where I would think that everybody would agree of information security would be in financial information. Nobody wants their credit card, to be around. So do you think that danger, how real is that danger? And do you think now buying online is as safer or less safe than the regular standard way of shopping or buying stuff?
I'd like to respond to that. I'm going to make a quick response if I could. And back me up, anybody who's been in charge of security operations. I worked for an insurance firm, and in their environment, they were subjected to thousands of attempts to get into their network every day. I think the number is around 4,000. So the role of the press and the role of issues, the high-profile issues that come out, they're important, they're tragic, but they're not really reporting on the scope of the problem. We hear about it, and I'm not necessarily an expert in this area, but it is actually broader and deeper. Getting back to you, Heartbleed was notable, but it's not the norm. The norm is constant attacks from everywhere.
I'll say this, I find it objectionable when we talk about, let's let the kids decide which way privacy should go because they are young, uneducated, naive, and just plain stupid. They don't understand what the consequences are. I've seen, I will say this, I went looking for a friend there was a young girl in grade 9 or 10 with the same name as my friend who had basically written, and I'll redact this, to screw me on her breasts on Facebook. There is nothing good that comes from that in the long run for that child. They don't understand the consequences of doing that in terms of their reputation, in terms of who they are as an adult. And Mark Zuckerberg could go screw himself with the, oh, it's all mamby-pamby, we don't know it's going to be something in the future. Screw that. We know what it is. We all have individual human rights that need to be protected by, and the individuals, my friends who work at Facebook, know this. And they work very hard to protect people's privacy and security. So it is certainly in flux, but Kim Kardashian is not the person who should be determining what the future of our privacy is. That much I know.
It's changing the society.
It is.
You have a question?
Thank you. It's a very interesting discussion. I'm not an engineer, I'm not a privacy expert. I work in community and women's rights. But my question is actually to understand better the current online call to action from Anonymous about Reset the Web. I'm seeing it, I'm reading it, I'm trying to understand what it's about, basically to stop mass NSA surveillance. Are there any comments or any sort of parallel about how this is a citizen's approach to protecting their own privacy?
I will say this, Anonymous started out very nice. I would be very careful about throwing my lot behind them at this point, because a lot of online criminals use the words anonymous and the Guy Fawkes mask as a way of covering up their crime. And I'm not talking about attacks on government or anything else. I'm talking about internet theft. So honestly, I think that brand has been diluted.
I don't know about anonymous actions, but if there's anything that's going to kind of help preserving privacy, especially from hackers and bad guys and government surveillance, is, I believe, the action to move pretty much all of the internet traffic to being encrypted. That actually makes it much, much more difficult on anybody to eavesdrop on the communication, because they cannot weave through the tons of traffic and find the relevant one to try to decrypt it. It's not foolproof, but it makes it much more difficult. It's all a game of priorities and probabilities. Having said that, would I say the real world or the internet world? Would you rather make transactions? I think the jury's still out on this one. With the new point of sale malware happening today, you're probably more likely to have your credit card compromised in a point of sale if you buy at a small mom and pop shop or some rural outlet somewhere. I think personally I had my credit card compromised about 3 times online, about twice in point of sale. So I think it's roughly even.
Just in response to your, what do we do about this race to expose more personal data, besides the fact that brought up that kids under 25 have no sense of risk management. I regard putting all your personal information out there, it's very much like taking your clothes off. It works for only a very few people. For the rest of us, it's probably a good idea to keep them on.
Just quickly,
is there anyone developing alternative consumer internet products that don't have the 15-page legal issues because they're not going to be sharing information and protecting the privacy of people and their experience on the internet? And the other is for Bell and IBM. How do you deal with situations where you have agencies asking you to divulge personal information to.
So to answer the first one, the company that I founded with a partner of mine was actually focused on building, one of the technologies which would avoid, communicating information in the way it's being communicated today in a privacy respecting fashion and secure fashion. The premise is that the service provider does not have access to the information. This way, the service provider has no obligation to provide it to anybody who asks, be it government or whoever else, or their own employees. The challenge is that the society today is not willing really to pay for a service like that to actually break the business case. Our business case, went through the bottom. So the technology, it does exist. It's just not commercially viable. Maybe one day, but not today. In terms of companies like Bell and IBM, and I'm still not speaking on behalf of Bell because this is an area where there are people much higher than me authorized to speak on the issue. Companies like Bell and like Google and like Facebook fall under national laws where they operate. And I used to work for Microsoft. I used to work very closely with Google and Amazon. And challenging these laws is very difficult, even if they wanted to. In most cases, these are issues of law enforcement and national security, and they actually should be forthcoming with the data. Again, the challenge is finding the right balance, and especially we're finding from the Snowden revelations and the Assange cases, the governments have been working through the back channel in getting some of this data. And that is something to be potentially concerned about as a citizen, especially once you know about it. Having said that, the balance needs to be struck, right? And you shouldn't expect that every time the law enforcement needs to get your info, you're going to get notified of it, right? Because that might compromise the investigation. At the same time, public in general should know what the process is and what the obligations are on the companies.
It's actually 1:30, but can we give Neil a chance to respond if you want?
Yes.
No?
Actually, we need to invest just a few minutes. I'm cutting. Lots of people wanted to really ask, maybe offline, but we need a conclusion, kind of a conclusion.
Part of that question.
I want the answer.
Okay.
Google search engine? Yeah? No?
Yes.
No?
We heard, but we don't know. We did not.
Right. We're talking about tools who are not collecting money. Well, there's no global solution. There's an awful lot of tools in the open source world that would answer your question. For instance, there's 289 search engines active right now that you can use. And some of the meta search engines don't collect any information at all. So this is an answer to your question, first part of your question.
How do we find it?
How do you find it?
Search.
Yeah, you have to Google it.
It's not except.
Can we have a recommendation of this panel, Gary, please? Kind of just a recommendation or conclusion of the panel?
Well,
What should
the conclusion of the panel is there is a problem.
What do you expect the vice
And it's not a very visible problem. It's like the iceberg.
Yeah.
And I guess the other recommendation is if you have information that you definitely don't want to get out, try to avoid putting it online.
Try to avoid the internet, maybe, huh?
What do you expect of IEEE on this issue?
What should lead?
The conclusion is that we identified the problem, and the solution is yet to come. This is my question.
I think we've heard today that we need education in the schools, and I believe that firmly. ISOC and other organizations are uniquely qualified to do that. We need new technologies. We don't need 5 people, one of whom was full-time, running the security software that protects 500 major banks and financial institutions. We need actual, real, contributory things, and we need better legislation and better protection from our legislators.
They don't
I mean,
protect themselves.
these are huge meta problems that we're not going to solve here today, but certainly IEEE has a technology tranche. They're a stakeholder. Let's go to work. No? Okay.
And I think in terms of recommendation, we should probably ask ourselves if, the solution doesn't start here. Each of us, basically, because we can rely on government to do education and all that, but we should be the first one to understand what's the risk. And we should tell our also children, if you want to use that, it's like a car, there's some roads that you need to, you can still decide to run 200 kilometers an hour on the highway. But you can say, here's some of the rules that you should. Password is confidential, but basically information you don't put, that kind of pictures on Facebook or that kind of thing. But that really, I think, starts from us, all of us.
That's a good one.
So I think the conclusion is take it away, think about it as a humanitarian initiative group, think about how this can be turned into projects. Education projects or real projects, security projects perhaps, to help people